Hello, everybody, and welcome to music's biggest night. Because unlike the Grammys, here you can't buy a nomination. I'm Hyperpunk Peaches, and this is my top 10 albums of 2024. Let's get into it. Hyperpunk Peaches. Now, I really tried to be a much more active listener of music this year. Not only did that mean I listened to more music, but I also would repeatedly go back to albums I didn't initially like, and would sometimes even wait a few months to return to a project I may have initially written off. That segues perfectly into the first entry on this list, number 10, Only God Was Above Us by Vampire Weekend. I did initially listen to this when it came out in April. However, besides Mary Boone and Ice Cream Piano, most of the tracks on it really didn't resonate with me. It wasn't until I went back to it in November that I decided it deserved a spot on this list. Now, the reason that this is relatively low is mainly just because it didn't soundtrack most of my 2024. Like I said, I went months in between listening to most of the music on this, so it really hasn't been until like the last month that I've really gotten to bite into the music and see what it has to offer. This album does a lot musically, and each track is a joy to listen to, with my standout easily being Classical. Now, I think the idea of old atrocities just kind of being viewed as the past, it was okay, is something that me and my friends have actually discussed quite a bit. Mainly in regards to the Colosseum. I feel like objectively most people think that the Colosseum is really cool, really badass. And we kind of glaze over the fact that they've murdered people and committed like horrible animal abuse. So there's this cognitive dissonance of, well, they didn't know any better. Even though they almost certainly did. Although a really solid album, I just felt it didn't have enough spotlight my year to really warrant it being higher on the list. Next up, in the number 9 spot, we have Blood, Hair, and Eyeballs by Alkaline Trio. This was a weird year for pop punk. Unlike last year, I felt like there were a lot fewer number of solid releases, and most of the albums that came out just kind of felt painfully derivative. I think the only other album that deserves a highlight here is I Want to Disappear by The Story So Far. However, of the two, I much more preferred Blood, Hair, and Eyeballs by Alkaline Trio. What I think this album does really well is it kind of distances itself from the generic pop punk sound. This doesn't really have nasally vocals or the just same 3 power chords repeated. Even the drumming on this album doesn't really feel like generic pop punk drums. However, like most pop punk albums, this does have its fair share of cringy lyrics, mainly on the song Teenage Heart, which also sounds the most generic pop punk in my opinion. All I want for Christmas is an AR-15. My stocking stuffed with fentanyl. The only other major issue I have with this album is the mixing. Now, I don't know why. Maybe some microphones were just too far away from the instruments, or maybe they just didn't have some things turned up enough, but this whole album kind of has a muffled sound to it, almost like you're listening to it through a wall. Now, on its own, this isn't a huge issue, although I would prefer if it wasn't there, but when you put it in a playlist with other songs, then it really sticks out a lot more. However, like I said, I think that the lyrics and the more, for lack of a better word, somber instrumentals compared to most pop punk, I very much think that this is my favorite pop punk album of the year. Number 8, The Road to Hell is Paved with Good Intentions by Vegyn. Now, I'm a pretty big trip-hop enjoyer, and I'm a pretty big fan of Vegyn, with my favorite project of his besides this being "The heart hurts but the head knows the truth." In typical Vegyn fashion, this album isn't very vocal heavy, and what is there is mostly samples.
Same old, same old.
However, this album really succeeds in creating an immersive soundscape that I find extremely relaxing. Although you could argue that a lot of these beats kind of blend together, I would argue that that's almost a pro of the album. It's really easy to just put on some headphones and get lost in the ambience, even if at the end of the day, there are some tracks where it's kind of hard to distinguish the two, or if you look back at the track list, you might be like, wait, what song is this? However, as a tribute to 90s trip-hop, I feel like it really succeeds, and although maybe the track list could have been trimmed a little bit, I feel like overall it is a very relaxing and enjoyable listening experience. Next up, in 7th place, we have Absolute Elsewhere by Blood Incantation. Now, I'm not really into the gore grind, really intense metal scene. However, this was my favorite metal album I listened to in 2024. What I really love about it is it's able to mix guttural death metal vocals with lighter synthy prog metal. Now, this sounds like it might be kind of hard switching between the two. However, this album is composed of 2 tracks, the Stargate and the Message, each at about 20 minutes long. Now, that means that these songs have a long time to build up to different musical styles, and so when it switches between the two, like on the second part of Stargate, it's not that jarring. It even manages to work in a few samples. It's really interesting.
They come from outer space.
Why not?
I personally really enjoyed this album. I think that this is a really interesting idea for combining genres, and I feel like it was really executed well. Next up, in 6th place, is maybe the biggest album of this year, Brat. Brat! Are you sick of Brat parodies yet? It's Brat by Charli XCX. I really enjoyed Brat. I think it is an amazing dance album with shockingly personal lyrics. However, I'm also not a huge fan of dance music. Although some tracks always hit, like Talk Talk or Apple, sometimes tracks like Von Dutch or Back to Back don't really hit just because I'm not in the mood for that kind of sound. I think its lyrics caught me the most off guard as, like I said, they are a lot more personal than you might expect from just dance music. I can't remember who made it, but there was some post that was like, do I want a baby bump or a bump of coke? And I mean, that describes the album very well.
So, we had a conversation on the way home. Should I start my birth control?
The only final thing I want to touch on is, I think it's weird that this album kind of became more of a cultural thing than people actually enjoyed the music. It's almost like a Barbie-fication, where it's like, I feel like less people are talking about the actual product itself and more like the aesthetic of liking it and being part of Brat Summer. I liked Brat, is what I'm trying to say. I thought it was a very enjoyable album. I just think it's weird that the aesthetic of Brat was almost separated and became its own thing from the actual album and the music. Before getting into the top 5, I would actually like to drop my honorable mentions here. That way you know that they're not going to be anywhere within the top 5, but I can still share some albums I think deserve the spotlight. First up is Short and Sweet by Sabrina Carpenter. I think that this is an amazing pop album. It is my girlfriend's favorite album of the year, and I really enjoyed it. Sabrina Carpenter definitely kind of took over pop this year. Pop this year was really, really good, but Short and Sweet was a really great album. It was the first album of hers I listened to, but I went back to listen to Emails I Can't Send, and I gotta say, I think I am a certified Sabrina Carpenter fan. Next up, I would be remiss to not mention my favorite band dropped an album, that being Saviors by Green Day. If you don't like modern Green Day, you're not gonna like this album. However, as an anecdote, when I was younger, I remember hearing Uno and Revolution Radio and being like, these albums are so good, how come people aren't talking about them? And somewhere out there, there's a middle schooler or early high schooler who's like, Saviors is so good, how come nobody's talking about this? And I think that is honestly really special. The fact that Green Day is still able to make music that mainly kids resonate with is genuinely impressive. And it gave them an excuse to tour, so I got to see Dookie and American Idiot live. And finally, Orchestre by Charli XCX. I am so sorry if I butchered that name. This is, from what I've heard, Charli's most experimental album. However, I feel like sometimes it hits the mark and sometimes it doesn't. This just barely didn't make the list. This one did take a lot of listens for me to really warm up to, as most of it is not in English, and that took some getting used to. But overall, I think it's a really amazing album. It just had a few songs that didn't hit, or some ideas that I didn't feel weren't executed enough to keep it from being on the top 10. And then I'll just throw a few others on here. Look, more good 2024 albums. In 5th place, we have Imaginational Disc by Magdalena Bay. Hope I didn't mispronounce that. I was in a music store buying the CD for it, and I mispronounced their name, and egg on my face. This album is really great. It was a lot poppier than I was expecting. However, it really reminds me of something like Karlene Polacek. The lyrics in this album are great, the imagery is great, and musically I think the album is incredible, with tracks like Angel on a Satellite being standout.
Always see the sky, angel on a satellite.
It also does what Brat does that I really love, where the start and ending track use the same music. They just kind of play with it a little.
Down the line, over the waves, 2 kids and a military. Open heart, on cliche, 2 kids in a new town, baby.
Overall, I'm certified Imaginational Disc pilled. I will insert as shown here. In 4th place was my most anticipated album of 2024, No Hands by Joey Valance and Brae. Holy shit, I love these guys. The guy's so nice, I had to see him twice.
Wake up and I'm feeling like a pop. Get up, wake up and I'm feeling like a pop. What? Wake up and I'm feeling like a pop.
That was right. I went to a lot of concerts this year, but they were the first and last that I got to see with their Punk Tactics tour and then their No Hands tour. These guys are just great at making catchy beats with funny lyrics, and what I love is they always bring the energy. You can hear these guys having fun. On top of that, this is by far their best album. It's their first to have features with Danny Brown on Pack a Punch, who does an incredible job and fits their style so well, as well as Z-Trip on the title track, and I don't know if his production is responsible for it, but the saxophone on that is so good. And then finally, I feel like their closer, Omnitrix, actually feels like an album closer. It doesn't just feel like the last track on the track list.
And all these girls wanna chase me now. Yeah, they wanna be a part of it. Oh, you wanna see a party trick? This ain't a watch, this an Omnitrix.
They've already announced that they've started work on their 3rd album, which I'm sure will come out next summer, and then I'll get to go see them go on tour again. I'm joking, obviously. Not trying to be an asshole. Wait! The 2024 mixtape is available right now at bigcartel.hyperpunkpeaches. The 2024 mixtape includes a full 8-page booklet with 2 exclusive die-cut stickers. Order your 2024 mixtape before it's too late! In the number 3 spot, we have Loss of Life by MGMT. holy shit, this album was slept on. I felt like when it came out, it hardly got discussed. I know I've mentioned before in a previous video that I don't really like the song Dancing in Babylon. My opinion has changed.
Dead and gone, dancing in Babylon.
I think I was just saying that because it does sound a little bit dated and I don't love the feature on it. However, re-listening to it, it's good. It's not bad. It is better than your average song. MGMT is just really good at making epic sounding music on this record, which I know that that's a term that gets thrown around for a lot of things, but truly, the instrumentals on the opener and the closer, both of which, like Brat and like Imaginational Disc, play off the same music.
You can sail off the edges of the earth.
Do a great job of feeling huge and ethereal with the lyrics leaning into this. Oh, it's in my car right now. Sorry, I was gonna grab it to look at the track list. It's on my car right now. Overall, I thought MGMT did a really good job on this release, and it's unfortunate that it didn't get more praise, in my opinion, but I was a huge fan of it, with my personal favorite track being Mother Nature.
Now I understand Mother Nature.
The penultimate album, my second favorite album of 2024, was Where's My Utopia by Yard Act. A lot of people keep calling this dance punk or art punk. So close. Welcome back, Lo-Fi Thriller. Yes, this album reminds me a lot of early Gorillaz. By that, of course, I mean their run from Self-Titled to Plastic Beach. Which is probably because, guess what? They had the same producer. This album was co-produced by Remy Kabaka Jr., who also worked on those 3 Gorillaz albums. I think with the most clear example of this being on the opening of Grifter's Grief, which literally sounds like it could have come off of Plastic Beach. Not only this, but James Smith's really nasally, snarky British vocals sound a lot like Damien Albarn.
Disbelief when they got grifted for the prize.
Now, no, I'm not just saying that I like this because it sounds like Gorillaz. There are a lot of tracks like We Make Hits or Welcome to... Is it called Welcome to My Office? It's Welcome to My Office. Dream Job. Dream Job. Tracks like Dream Job or We Make Hits are very much not Gorillaz songs. However, I think it's pretty clear to see the inspiration. On top of that, the lyrics in this are very introspective. Not even introspective, just nostalgic. He discusses a lot about his childhood, with one of my favorites being Down by the Stream, where he talks about how they just used to give this guy shit, and he was just a huge fucking asshole to him, and he's just like, sorry I never apologized. And then he talks about how he would like fuck up his son if he found out he was doing the same thing. But there's a great line where it's basically like, what's bullying and what's just giving you what you're good for. On the penultimate song on the album, he's telling this whole sad story of how he busted his lip up when he was on vacation, and he remembers because his dad gave him these chips that look different, and it connects a lot of themes and lyrics from the entire album. It name drops Fizzy Fish, and then at the end the interviewer's like, are you making this up? And he's like, yes, some of it. That's really funny in my opinion.
Are you making this up?
Some of it, yeah, why?
Well, what are you doing that for?
I just didn't want to burden anyone with the truth.
And then, after that, he goes on to be like, I was just nervous what wankers would think of album 2. We're listening to album 2 right now. It's a little cheeky fourth wall break in the album. Now, before I get to my first album, I felt like this year had 2 artists who very much defined music this year, despite the fact that they didn't drop an album. And I would be remiss to not mention them. You know, I think it's pretty clear, as much as I enjoy it, and as much as I assume you enjoy it, most people don't really listen to full albums anymore. So I'm introducing the Best Artist category, with our first being the Best Female Artist of the Year, Chappell Roan. Now, I'm not unique. I was not tapped into the culture. I also was not aware of Chappell Roan's existence until she became extremely popular. And I don't think people realize just how rare it is for someone to go from relatively unknown to having, like, the personal contact information of Billie Eilish and playing massive festivals, hosting SNL. This really has been, of all the female pop artists who kind of define this year, Chappell Roan, I think, definitely deserves the spot of Best Female Artist. On top of that, I just think her music sounds really good. The lyrics are great and fucking not safe for kids. Don't let your kids listen to Midwest Princess. Hyperpunk parenting advice. Unfortunately, I don't think that this level of fame and success is going to last for very long. Not because she doesn't have the ability to keep it up, but because I think people were so eager to hype her up to be like, oh, she's so amazing. I'm honestly kind of afraid that a lot of people are going to realize, hey, wait, this is a lot more queer than I was expecting. And she's going to get a lot more backlash, and you can argue a lot of that has already started happening, but I just want to say, I like Chappell Roan. I think she's very talented, and I really do think that the cultural opinion on her might shift in the years to come. The Best Male Artist of the Year is, you know who it is. It's Kendrick Lamar. Holy shit. The beef with Drake and Kendrick Lamar defined 2024 for me. I was pretty tapped in since Like That, in the sense that I listened to every song at least within the hour it came out. And I was actually staying at a friend's dorm room when all those diss tracks just kept getting exchanged like one after the other. And we both followed that together, and it was really great just watching all that shit go down. I truthfully did not have a dog in the fight. I'm not gonna lie, I was bumping push-ups. I thought it was a fucking great track, but there is no denying that Kendrick fucking wiped the floor with Drake. And then, even though I was like, oh, these artists didn't drop an album, then he goes on to drop GNX, fucking shocking everybody. And I think the fact that Drake's only reaction was to fucking take him to court is just pathetic. I'm not some big analysis who's going to talk about all the implications or all the history behind this. You guys have FD Signifier for that. But I think when it comes to Male Artists of the Year, there's no one more fitting for the title than Kendrick Lamar. Alright, my album of the year for 2024 was Prelude to Ecstasy by The Last Dinner Party. A lot of female music is not made for me, which I've said in the past. But I would like to elaborate. The reason I say that and kind of find it funny is because I would argue that no music is made for you. I truly think most musicians make music for themselves. So I think it's fine to be like, oh, Brat wasn't made for me. Prelude to Ecstasy wasn't made for me. Because, like, I truthfully don't feel like it was made for anyone but the musician. Before I start talking about the album, I went to one of their shows, and it was the first time I have ever felt not welcome at a concert. And I'm not going to lie, that did kind of sour my taste on this artist. And then following them, they actually went on to have this issue at a few other venues. This is not me trying to be like, oh, feel bad for me. Just, I think their fans are annoying, is where I'm going with this. With all that being said, Prelude to Ecstasy is an amazing album. It's a rock album, straight up. And if anyone tries to deny that, that's just BS. Whether it's the really energetic feminine urge, or the slower start of Beautiful Boy, this whole album musically is great. And that's without even mentioning how incredible the lyrics are. I don't know if I fully can explain why the lyrics are great, because I've never felt like I've been in a space just for their entertainment. And then I love how it kind of uses religious metaphors in the song Sinner, where it's talking about wanting to have sexual relations with a female, putting it very bluntly. I truthfully loved this album, and I thought it was great. I thought that the lyrics were a lot more hard-hitting than I was expecting. I maybe brushed it off initially as just a Saltburn the album. I believe I described it. But truthfully, I think this album is great. And as a first release from a band, holy shit, I cannot wait to see where The Last Dinner Party goes. And so with that, concludes Hyperpunk Peach's top 10 albums of 2024. We had Only God Was Above Us, Blood, Hair, and Eyeballs, The Road to Hell is Paved with Good Intentions, Absolute Elsewhere, Brat, Imaginational Disc, No Hands, Loss of Life, Where's My Utopia, and Prelude to Ecstasy. Overall, I feel like these are 10 incredible albums, and although, yeah, I may like some more than others, I truthfully think that these are all really solid releases. Yeah, if you have any interest in receiving a super badass, in my opinion, custom CD, please go to hyperpunkpeaches.bigcartel.com and order yourself a copy of my 2024 mixtape, Stay Hyperpunk.